Do you agree with the following statement? You get what you pay for. The answer is yes. I wouldn't think twice before sending out those buy low offers in Dynasty. Look, I get it. Everybody loves to buy low, especially if you feel like you're getting a young player for a great deal. But look, we're going to go over some players here that you probably should think twice. Dynasty expert John and I are going to talk about some players that you might think you're buying low, but you should probably just avoid for now. I know we thought Marvin Harrison Jr. was going to be not only the number one receiver on the Cardinals, a number one receiver for fantasy, possibly the number one fantasy receiver because he was supposed to be a generational talent. We've heard that before, right? At the same time, why should we think that anything is going to change for Marvin Harrison, not just this year, but going forward? Why should we tell people not to buy on Harrison?
Yeah, and I think that is the main point here is what is changing. I mean, you look at last year compared to this year with Marvin Harrison, feels like so far through the first 3 games of the season, there's absolutely nothing different about what's a very anemic offense. And we look back to last year, MH only had 1 game where he did not score a touchdown that ended up in a double-digit fantasy point stat line. He's very, very touchdown dependent in this offense. And through the first 3 games of the season, he only has 1 receiving touchdown against a very bad Saints secondary. And really, when you break down the stats last year, like I said, those 8 receiving touchdowns are what kept him afloat in fantasy scoring. And I know some people are starting to look at this like, okay, maybe it's, not the offensive scheme here and all of that, and maybe it's not Kyler. And we saw that big drop from Marvin Harrison Jr. this past week, but, he has actually only had 2 drops this season, and last year he had a drop rate of just 1.6%. So I really think it's just a matter of he's not being used correctly, and the Cardinals are not prioritizing getting him the football. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. is averaging 6 or less targets per game and 3 total catches per game. This is just what feels like a very bad scheme fit, and I don't think it's going to get better anytime under this current coaching regime. So maybe you could argue like he is a decent buy low if the coaching regime is going to change sometime soon, but I don't know. The Cardinals feel very stagnant. And for me, I would rather just avoid this situation. And unfortunately, I mean, with how much hype Marvin Harrison Jr. had, it feels like not a situation that you want to avoid. But I do think for now, it's best until we see something concrete happen with his career.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned those drops because some people will say, "Oh, you're just overreacting," right? That last game, obviously, the really bad drop, and another could have been touchdown in the end zone. I don't know if that counts as a drop, but again, you're an elite receiver. You maybe make that catch. This isn't about that, right? It's more to this. He just isn't performing at a high level. And I don't just mean not elite, not good. And so far this season, his average separation score is below average, right? His expected fantasy points, he's way below that. I mean, he just hasn't proven to really be an elite separator. The contested catches that he could make, he's not making. There's a lot that should worry you here, enough to make you say, like it's just not worth it because you're not getting him cheap in Dynasty, that's for sure. And even if the coaching staff changes, like you said, I understand that's definitely possible. Kyler Murray is not going away, right? His contract, his age, he's going to be the quarterback there for a while. I think that is part of it. And there's no excuse here. He's got only a tight end as his target competition. So, yeah, I can tell you, I didn't draft a lot of Harrison in redraft, and I'm definitely not buying him in Dynasty. That's for sure. All right, here's another one. Now, how about a rookie receiver who still has plenty of room to grow, and yet this is not the time to buy low because I don't think that the concerns for Travis Hunter have been overblown. Why is this not a good time to take a chance on a guy who's, let's face it, not just a first round, but like a top 5 pick in Dynasty rookie draft?
Yeah, this is a tough one because, like you said, I mean, he's only 3 games into his career, so it feels like the opportunity is still somewhat limitless. And in Dynasty, that is always true to a degree, but we just have to kind of start to face the fact that Travis Hunter was always a better defender than an offensive player. And we're kind of just seeing that come full swing in his time in the NFL. Week 1, he only played 9.4% of defensive snaps. But then we saw a massive increase to 62.3% of defensive snaps in week 2. This past week, 68.3% of defensive snaps. Just 2 targets, just 1 catch this past week. Like, the fantasy production is not there for Travis Hunter. And maybe that changes, but do you really want to go out and, buy low on a player like this who's not having the fantasy production and just not know on a week to week basis what you're going to get in your, lineup on your roster? If you're in an IDP league, that's one thing. Obviously, he still has value there, but it's a really difficult player to manage when you can't even just throw him into your flex and hope for the best, right? And overall, we'll talk a little bit more about this in a couple of minutes here, but the chemistry just looks off between Trevor Lawrence and Travis Hunter, and all the wide receivers on this team right now. The offense just does not look productive. The Liam Cohen system, maybe not exactly what we thought it was going to be. And what we really have to face at the end of the day is through the first 3 weeks of the season, everything that you want to see from Travis Hunter has gone down. Targets, receptions, fantasy points, offensive snaps, every single metric has gone down. For me, once again, it's similar to Marvin Harrison Jr., like still a tough player to just go out and buy low on. I don't think he's worth the price right now, even at a cheaper rate. I would rather let somebody else have him on their roster and me be able to steer clear away.
And we're going to continue to talk Jaguars here, but not BTJ. Right, a lot of talk about Brian Thomas Jr. and the way he's looked this first couple of weeks. I'm okay buying low on Brian Thomas Jr. This is a different situation, so we're not going to say avoid him. I'm voting Travis Hunter because exactly what I was worried about, exactly why I actually didn't draft him in any of my rookie drafts in Dynasty. He's a two-way player. I said it from the beginning. It just makes more sense to have an elite, potentially shut down cornerback than a really good receiver in the NFL. It's just more valuable. And I really think they were stringing us along saying, hey, he's going to be a receiver. He's going to be a receiver. He'll play a little corner. What are we seeing? No, he's moving to that corner position. It just takes longer to figure that out than it does receiver in the NFL. And so, yeah, I'm worried that that's exactly what we're going to see. It's going to be like a 2-to-1 ratio the other way, defense over offense. As far as the system and all that, I think it's too early to judge Liam Cohen, this coaching staff. I mean, it's not too early to judge Trevor Lawrence, though. You know what? Let's just jump right into that because we have other players to talk about. Let's talk Trevor Lawrence because this is a guy who's a former number one pick, supposed to be a franchise quarterback in this new system. This was supposed to fix everything. Oh, yeah, and he's got a shiny new toy in Travis Hunter at receiver to go with BTJ. And it's getting worse. Why is it getting worse, and how much worse could it even get?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. The difficult thing is, most people in dynasty formats are playing in super flex formats. So there's always some sort of value to the quarterback position. And right now, early into the season, we've had a lot of major injuries at the quarterback position. Guys like Jaden Daniels missing time, even lesser guys like Justin Fields, obviously Joe Burrow. So there's always this need to at least be trying to target the quarterback position. But I just don't know if Trevor Lawrence is a good fantasy quarterback. We looked to last year. He only had 18 or more fantasy points 4 times last year, only played in 10 games last year. And ultimately, since 2022, when he was the quarterback 8, had that sophomore season after getting the pass with the awful coaching staff in his rookie year, he's only had 18 or more fantasy points 10 total times since 2022. There's no real upside to his game. He has never thrown for more than 25 passing touchdowns in a season. And we've kind of touched on the video already, but I don't know what is going on in this offense right now. The chemistry is off just across the board between Lawrence and the coaching staff, between Lawrence and the wide receiver room. So far to start the year, he has as many passing touchdowns as he does interceptions. And it is difficult because, we saw in week 2 against a bad defense, right? There's still going to be flashes here where Trevor Lawrence is at least solid in fantasy, but the floor is just not safe whatsoever. And like I said, the upside is very difficult to call. So this does kind of feel like one of those moments where you can kind of maybe hit on any Jags players in a trade, maybe outside of like Travis Etienne or Bashal Tutin. But generally speaking, I think for now, when it comes to quarterback position, you might even be able to find better players on the waiver wire with how many injuries have been happening. And we kind of saw some of that this past week with guys like Marcus Mariota and Carson Wentz and Tyrod Taylor. Just don't always panic, even in super flex formats, right? And think that you need to go out and buy low on a quarterback that's just not simply producing.
And it's not like he needs more time. He's been in the league several years. Why are we going to see anything different? I get a new coaching staff, a guy who's an offensive minded, coach. It takes more than that. A guy just doesn't all of a sudden transform overnight. This is not his second year, his third year. I think we know what T Law is. And look, he's never been considered a dual threat quarterback. Like we know he doesn't run a lot. I really thought he would run at least a little bit, coming out of college. He's very athletic, right? He's a tall guy. He's big enough. He can, move his way through or around smaller defenders. He just doesn't have any rushing upside, really. I think he could have a little bit if he tried more, but man, he just locks in on receivers. And, some people are blaming the receivers for not getting open. I don't think it's just the receiver. He's got plenty of talent there at receiver. There's just a lot going on here. This is not the first time we've seen T Law look pretty mediocre. And honestly, I think he's just kind of skating by on his draft stock and the fat contract, which pretty clearly does not deserve. That brings us to another franchise quarterback that is looking like, well, anything but a franchise quarterback. We know CJ Stroud is the face of the Texans, but how's a guy who looked great as a rookie now, bad as a sophomore? Is he continuing to decline? Is that what's happening? I mean, how is he continuing to get worse year after year? I don't want to say how bad can it get because I know it could eventually result in a benching if they actually had anybody better behind him, which they don't. But look, this guy's supposed to be a franchise quarterback. I- I'll be honest, I was tempted to buy low in a super flex league myself, but I'm like, how can I buy a guy who has looked so bad? And is this potentially going to change?
Yeah, this is another. It's just a tough one, right? You look at this team, you look at the makeup of this roster, like the offensive line play has been really porous over the last 2 years. They bring in a defensive minded head coach. Like the defense, the front seven has improved over the past year or two. They've given CJ Stroud, different weapons. Can't, help the Tank Dell injury that happened last year, but last year also had Stephon Diggs added. Obviously, Nico Collins is a great wide receiver one. And this year they go out and draft 2 wide receivers, go out and sign Christian Kirk, who is, just starting to get his game rolling this year. But still, it's just one of these situations where, once again, I think there's been enough around CJ Stroud, even with the bad offensive line play, that we should be seeing more, especially just from a pure fantasy perspective. Even if the Texans aren't necessarily always winning games, in terms of fantasy, there should be production here. And similar to Trevor Lawrence, I just don't know if CJ Stroud is a good fantasy quarterback. Once again here, he has more interceptions than touchdowns on the season so far, only throwing 2 touchdowns, throwing 3 interceptions so far. And we go back to last year, right? After, the great rookie season, which was good, I mean, fantasy wise, it wasn't like out of this world or anything. It was a top 12 quarterback, but go back to his sophomore year, he had 18 or more fantasy points just 4 times last year. And that's it. He's had 14 or less fantasy points in every game this year so far. And the thing that's always concerned me over the past year or so with CJ Stroud is like the floors. We just talked about like the floors not being safe with Trevor Lawrence. The floors are just as dangerous with CJ Stroud. You look at this year, once again, like 9.7 fantasy points in week 1. At that point in superflex formats, I mean, you might as well just throw a running back or wide receiver, maybe even a tight end in there. There's just no real value. And, kind of getting back to your question, does this get better? Well, I don't know. I mean, what is the answer here? Maybe better offensive line is like the really only fair criticism here. Play calling, coaching scheme, that type of stuff is fair as well. But I just don't know at the end of the day if CJ Stroud's ever going to quite live back up to that rookie season in terms of his dynasty value overall.
Yeah, it's really hard to believe how quickly and again, this is where you can't go overboard for any player after a good rookie season, even a guy who looks like a franchise quarterback. Um, I will say, last year it was easy to point to the injuries at receiver, right? Stephon Diggs out, Tank Dell out. They didn't have a lot of depth. That was supposed to be fixed this year. They drafted 2 rookie receivers, Christian Kirk in free agency, a solid, not exciting, veteran there. And again, it's just been worse. So look, I know, I get it. You love to make those buy low offers and trade and get value, but gotta be careful, buyer beware, because sometimes you're gonna get what you paid for. You buy low, you get low. All right. So be careful those trades. Always make smart decisions. That's why we got Dynasty Endgame here. John's here to help you out every week with new Dynasty advice. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, do it now. Just getting started. The best is yet to come.